at the moment. So, here we are, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight of the Royal Air Force. The Lancaster appeared on the memorial flight in 1973. Of course, the Lancaster didn't fly until 1941, so it wasn't around at the time of the Battle of Britain. But we're very happy to have her in the flight these days. She's one of only 2 Lancasters left flying in the world, the other one's in Canada. And I'm going to let you enjoy the combined sound of the 4 Rolls-Royce Merlins and the 1 Rolls-Royce Griffon engine as they fly by in trail. There is the Spitfire pulling away. The Lancaster continues serenely off to our left against that rather lovely cloudscape. Gives something special to these aircraft and makes your pictures even better with that kind of background. The Lancaster will disappear for a little while. Towards us is flown by Squadron Leader Duncan Mason. He was actually a Harrier pilot, and when the ungrateful government scrapped the Harriers, he found himself holding. Nothing better to do than fly with the BBMF, poor chap. It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it. If you're a connoisseur of Rolls-Royce engines, you'll detect that this has a somewhat different note to the Merlin engines of the Lancaster. This has a rather more fruity, raughty note. Big Griffon. It's a lot bigger than the Merlin. 37 litres instead of 27 litres. Supermarine, the company that had designed it, and the wonderful man, Reginald Mitchell, who is responsible for this elliptical wing, which we see right now, that elegant shape. Wing is as thin and narrow as it can be, but towards the root thicker and wider to accommodate machine guns and the retractable undercarriage. But Supermarines couldn't cope with the order that the Air Ministry had given them. It took them a while to gear up for production. Eventually, a production Mark I Spitfire was delivered to 19 Squadron of the Royal Air Force at Duxford in August 1938. But with a rather exquisite irony, Reginald Mitchell, R.J. Mitchell, the designer, had died 14 months earlier of cancer. Despite knowing he had the disease and didn't have long to live, he'd continued working almost to the end, but he never saw how great his achievement had been. By the outbreak of war in September 1939, about 300 Spitfires had been built, and the RAF had 9 squadrons of them. More than 2,000 were on order, and they opened a new Spitfire factory at Castle Bromwich, not very far from here. The first German aircraft to fall to a Spitfire was a Junkers Ju-88, shot down by a 603 Squadron Spitfire off the Scottish coast. The legend of the Spitfire was really forged in the skies over southern England during the summer months of 1940 in the Battle of Britain. And as it pulls away, place is taken by the Lancaster. Flight Lieutenant Ernie Taylor is the man, the captain of the aircraft today. Co-pilot, Flight Lieutenant Loz Rushmere, navigator, Squadron Leader Russell. And the flight engineer is, I think, Master Aircrew Bob Carter, but I'm not absolutely sure. This is an Avro Lancaster Mark I. The Mark I's flew throughout the war, although they did make some Mark II's with a radial engine, the Bristol Hercules, that weren't all that successful. But then they began to get Packard Merlins as opposed to Rolls-Royce Merlins, same engine but made in America, and they were able to put the Mark I Lancasters back into production. Probably the most successful then heavy bomber of the war. Bomb doors open. And that huge bomb bay that we see with the bomb doors open there could carry a normal bomb load of 14,000 pounds. But at one stage they upped that to a maximum of 22,000 pounds, more than 10 tons, for the single huge Grand Slam bomb. It's the only aircraft ever to carry such a big bomb. And incidentally, the American equivalent of this, the B-17, their maximum was under 13,000 pounds. So this had significantly bigger bomb load capability than the B-17. I think we'll see the bomb doors closing. Ernie Taylor brings the Lancaster back in front of us. George Edwards said of the aircraft, Sir George Edwards, grand old man of British aviation, who died in 2003, this was an aircraft designed by engineers and built by craftsmen and women for heroes to fly. 7,377 of these aircraft were built, and of that, 3,349 were lost on operations. That's 45%. So night after night, those crews would go out knowing that their chances of survival were tiny. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that later this month, we are finally going to open a proper Bomber Command Memorial in London, in St James's Park, just off Piccadilly. Not before time. In Bomber Command as a whole, 126,000 aircrew flew into battle and 58,000 of them died. That's about 46% too. Bomber Command fatalities were 1 in 7 of the total service casualties of the whole war. To rejoin the mothership. And Duncan Mason flying the Spitfire there is a pretty happy guy, because having held on the BBMF for a while, he now finds that he is going to be the officer commanding the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight from the end of this season, which is one of the only 2 full-time aircrew jobs on the squadron. So he's going to take over from squadron leader Ian Smith. As Her Majesty the Queen said on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, she said, "There are few sights or sounds able to evoke more powerful thoughts and emotions than the BBMF flying overhead. To some it commemorates loved ones and relatives who fought and died in the air during the Second World War. To others it's an example of this nation's resilience and its indomitable spirit in the face of adversity. For yet others, it represents a tangible link between the modern Royal Air Force and its illustrious forefathers. I would commend you all," so that's an order from the Queen, "that when you next hear or see these aircraft, remember not only those who died serving this country in the air, but spare a thought for those who continue to serve wherever they are required around the world." And just out of interest, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight costs between £2.5 and £3 million a year to run. So actually you could have 3 of those for the price of one Jonathan Ross. I think I know which I'd rather have.